So, today we're going to dig into this really powerful theory that suggests all the chaos and division we're seeing in the world, well, it isn't random. It's actually part of a predictable cycle, one that we can track using math and history.
You've probably felt it, right? This sense that things are getting more and more polarized, this economic anxiety, this social unrest. But what if it's not just a feeling? What if there are actual predictable forces at play? Kind of like hidden rhythms in history that we can measure.
To even begin to understand these rhythms, we have to look at history through a completely new lens. And that brings us to a field of study with a pretty cool name. And that field is called Cleodynamics. As you can see, it comes from Cleo, the Greek muse of history. But what is it, really? Well, think of it as the science of using math to find hidden patterns in history, almost like how an ecologist would track the boom and bust cycles of animal populations in the wild.
The main investigator behind all this is a guy named Peter Turchin. And his journey, well, it's pretty fascinating. He actually started out as an ecologist studying beetles and their population cycles. But then he had this totally radical idea. What if you could take the same mathematical tools, the same models, and use them to explain the rise and fall of human empires? So our historical detective starts digging. What does he find? He discovers that these huge periods of instability are consistently driven by two powerful social engines, and they're both fueled by the exact same mechanism. He's got this great name for it, the wealth pump. It's this idea that when a society grows, the economic gains don't get spread around. Instead, they get pumped upwards, concentrating more and more wealth and power into the hands of a very small group. And this pump, he argues, powers two incredibly dangerous forces. So on one side, you have what he calls popular immiseration. That's a fancy way of saying life just gets a lot harder for the average person. But at the exact same time, that wealth pump creates elite overproduction. This is when the wealthy class starts producing way more ambitious, educated people than there are powerful jobs for them to fill. This leads to this fierce, zero-sum competition among the elites themselves. Probably the best way to get your head around elite overproduction is to think of it as a high-stakes game of musical chairs. Except here, the chairs represent positions of power and influence. Okay, so let's rewind to the 1950s. For every 10 chairs in the game, you had about 15 people with the right credentials trying to grab a seat. The odds? Not too bad, right? Most people who played the game could expect to find a place. But then you fast forward to the 1990s, and whoa, the game has gotten way harder. Now you've got 50 people scrambling for those same 10 chairs. All of a sudden, you have a lot more losers than winners. And today, it's even more intense. We're talking about 70 people competing for every 10 spots. This creates a huge pool of what Turchin calls failed elite aspirants. These are highly educated, frustrated people who feel like the system betrayed them. And it's these individuals, he argues, who often go on to lead radical movements from all across the political spectrum. Now, you might be thinking, okay, this all sounds very now. But here's the thing. Turchin's model shows this exact same pattern has appeared before. Let's take a look at the decades leading right up to the American Civil War. This timeline is just wild because you can literally see both engines firing up at once. Look here. After 1820, elite wealth just explodes, but the number of powerful political jobs stays flat. That's your elite overproduction. At the same time, a big surge in immigration drives down wages for workers. That's popular immiseration. And the result? By the 1850s, you have urban riots and the rise of populist parties. Does any of that sound familiar? It's in these moments of intense pressure that unlikely figures can suddenly rise to the very top. And that brings us to the question of Abraham Lincoln. I mean, how on earth did this outsider manage to win the ultimate prize? Lincoln's rise is a perfect case study of these forces in action. He was basically a failed elite aspirant himself, one of a huge glut of lawyers all competing for power. His genius was in figuring out how to tap into all that popular misery and channel that anger against the established Southern elite, the slobocracy, who were seen as the ones running the wealth pump. All right, so let's bring the investigation back to the present day. How do these historical patterns stack up against the data from our own time? If you're looking for the smoking gun for modern popular immiseration, this chart is it. Seriously. Look at the bar on the left. That's productivity. The economy has been growing and growing. Now look at the bar on the right. That's the median wage. It's almost completely flat.
That huge gap between the two, that's the wealth pump, working overtime, sending all those gains straight to the top.
So that's one engine. But what about the other one, elite overproduction? Well, just like back in Lincoln's time, one of the main pathways to political power is getting a law degree. And here, the data tells a pretty remarkable story.
This table is just striking. Law school graduate salaries have basically split into two different worlds. You have about 20% who land these amazing jobs making close to $200,000, but look at the top row. Fully half are making under $75,000, often with a mountain of student debt. You are creating a massive class of highly educated, frustrated people who entered a profession that is a direct pipeline to political power. It's the absolute perfect recipe for instability.
And all these pressures, they have a real human cost. 6.4%. That's the number of Americans who reported being in extreme distress in 2019. That's almost double the rate from the 90s. This isn't just a statistic, this is the raw fuel for popular discontent.
So, if the historical parallels are this strong and the data is this clear, does that mean we're just doomed to repeat the past? What happens next?
And this brings us to maybe the most important point of all. Turchin's model isn't a prophecy. Think of it more like a weather forecast. These huge structural forces are like a massive pressure system building offshore. It doesn't guarantee a hurricane will make landfall, but it makes one far, far more likely. The model sets the stage for a crisis, but it doesn't write the final act. We do.
And that leaves us with the critical question. History shows that societies can and have reversed these trends. They've shut down the wealth pump and eased that internal competition. But can it be done proactively through reform? Or does it always take a catastrophic breakdown to reset the system? That's the challenge these patterns are laying right at our feet.